Paul George had surgery on his knee, and Bleacher Report released their top 100 list all time. So I'm going to talk about a couple players who I think are too low on that list. But first, let's start with the Sixers and the Paul George thing, because Paul George just had arthroscopic knee surgery, and he's going to be reevaluated before the season starts, before camp starts. So it seems like the surgery is, I guess, kind of more so like not as serious as some other surgeries. However, having surgery anytime is always something, to look out for. And the fact that the Sixers obviously went through their injury troubles last year, Paul George being a part of those injury troubles, and this team, especially signing Paul George to that, big max contract, was part of their plan to have their, own version of a big three and to be able to contend for championships with Joel Embiid and Maxey. And so now it's kind of like, is this going to put their plans behind again to end up contending for a championship? Because we know Joel Embiid, when he is healthy, is awesome. Like an MVP candidate and obviously won MVP. But the problem with Embiid is, like, it's not his fault that, he unfortunately is injury prone at this point, but they have to manage his injury and his minutes and stuff like that. And I don't think we would see Embiid play an 82-game season, even if he was fully healthy. Like, they are going to do the load management thing, right? So we already know that, Joel Embiid is going to probably miss some games during the season. But if Paul George is not healthy to start the season, that of course makes it a little bit more difficult, one, to load manage Embiid because you don't have Paul George there. I know Paul George, didn't have his best season last year, but the whole season was kind of crazy for them. So let's see the kind of numbers that Paul George puts up this year, now that he's more adjusted. But let's just say Paul George is a 20-point per game guy, as he's been, most of his career. If they don't have that 20 points per game to start the season, like, even if he is playing on the court, but he's still, like, getting back into it and getting, super healthy again and, readjusting to his knee, that could also hinder their ability to rest Embiid, which obviously, again, is like one of their number one focus, to make sure Embiid is healthy for the playoffs. So that's one issue. Like, it's not just Paul George, which of course we want to see Paul George healthy, and him potentially not being healthy is just unfortunate for the Sixers in general, which, again, I think he will be healthy eventually during the season. But, like, I'm saying it goes beyond just Paul George. It could affect their ability to be able to load manage Embiid, so to speak, which could derail their whole plans. Like, it could have a trickle effect. So that is one issue with the Paul George thing. The upside, if there is an upside to the Paul George thing, I think, depending on, what VJ Edgecomb does in his, rookie season and stuff like that, this could be a potential upside. Now, if you watch this page, I said that I think VJ Edgecomb is going to be one of the best players in this draft. And by him being one of the best players in this draft, my only concern about him going to the Sixers was that with Paul George there healthy, and then obviously Embiid and Maxey, was he going to get enough playing time, because they are trying to contend? And not only was he going to get enough playing time, but if he does get playing time, is he going to get enough touches? So the upside here is that VJ Edgecomb might get more minutes, might get more touches, and be able to show out, kind of the way that Jared McCain was showing out last year in his rookie season, who he should be back too. Like, Jared McCain should be healthy too. So they do have him, and he was, might have been rookie of the year if he stayed healthy. So the upside is that VJ Edgecomb, if he is what I think he's going to be, obviously he's not going to be the seasoned veteran that Paul George is, but if he can, come in his rookie year and give you 16 a night, and we know he's a really, really good defender, so his defensive instincts and his ability to take on, some of the really good offensive players on the other team is definitely something that they're going to love. So if he is able to hold it down while Paul George is out, again, if Paul George is going to miss some time, I'm not saying he is. I don't know if he will. But that could be the bright spot, and also it gives VJ Edgecomb time to develop. So Injuries are never fun. We never want to see anybody injured, but sometimes there could be bright spots and upsides like that. Like other players get the opportunity to develop. And we see, especially, in today's NBA, you need depth to win a championship. You need to have players coming off the bench, who can score, defend, and do other things for you when your starters are off the floor or if they're having an off night. So him being able to potentially, again, Paul George might be healthy to start the season. This conversation may be moot. But even if Paul George has to manage his minutes here and there too, this could help them down the line, because their aspirations are to make the playoffs and go to the NBA Finals. So if you have VJ Edgecomb playing real NBA minutes, like big minutes, closing time minutes while Paul George is, out, then when the playoffs comes around, he still will be a rookie and hasn't had that experience, but at least you know that he will have been in some of those big moments, so it may be easier for him to transition from that. And same with Jared McCain, I expect him to get minutes too. So the injury is not good news for the Sixers, of course. You want Paul George healthy. But again, I believe he'll be back, some point this season, maybe even to start the season. And if he's not, it may be, I don't want to say a blessing in disguise, but it may be, giving the younger guys an opportunity to be prepared when the playoffs roll around. Somebody said for the Sixers, the season and they are not necessarily alone. Comes down to how they look at the trade deadline, health, and experience. Yeah, so obviously health is a really big concern for them because we've seen not just Joel Embiid, but Paul George, now this is the second year in a row that he's having some kind of injury. And this happened, I don't know, maybe a few days ago or whatever, but it happened during some kind of training session. Like, this wasn't Paul George during the season and he got hurt in the game. This was during some kind of training session. That's the second player we saw that happen to, because last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, Jaren Jackson Jr., same thing. He signed his max extension, and then it was reported a day later that he had like turf toe or something. And so he had surgery, and now he's going to be out for at least 3 to 4 months. So this is not the first person to have some kind of like training injury in the past 2 weeks. So that's a little crazy. So injuries are never good, and we hope Paul George gets healthy and gets back on the court soon. But again, this may give the younger guys an opportunity, to develop and be ready for when the big moment is needed. So that's my opinion on the Sixers. I still think, again, if Paul George is healthy and all, their big three is healthy and the team is, healthy, there's no reason why they shouldn't make the playoffs. And you would think with all that talent that they should make some kind of run. Where that goes, I don't know, but they should, do something in the playoffs. So that's my opinion on the Sixers. So Bleacher Report released a top 100 all-time list. I think it was today. And we know these top 100 lists, when they get released every year, it's always, I know that they evaluate and everybody has their own opinion, which is why I say top 10 lists all time, all that are always subjective. They're always going to be opinionated. And you really shouldn't take it personal because it is one person's opinion and every person's opinion is different. So there's never going to be a definitive list where it's correct, so to speak. There's no right or wrong list. There are obviously levels to it. If someone put Michael Jordan, for example, as the 50th greatest player of all time, obviously that's just silly. But generally speaking, the top 10 players all time are amazing players, right? So people will mix and match, and your top 10 is not someone else's top 10. What I will say, there are a few players on the list where I feel like they are too low, and it's hard to, I'm not going to sit here and say I know who to take out and replace them with and move around. I'm just going to say the players that I felt like were too low. So if they redid the list, I would say Steph Curry and Kobe Bryant were too low. If you watch this page, I think Steph Curry is at the minimum top 5 all time. That is my opinion. You can disagree, but I think Steph Curry is a top 5 at the minimum player all time. And honestly, I don't have a top 10 list, as I've told you guys before. If I had a top 10 list, I might have Steph Curry number 3 all time in NBA history. He's either 3, 4, or 5 on whatever list I have. I don't know where, because again, I don't have a list. But Steph Curry is no lower than 5 on a list for me, personally. So seeing Steph Curry at number 10, I'm like, that's way too low. That's way too low for Steph Curry. And again, it's really hard to argue because when you look at the top 10 lists that they put out, and most people's top 10 lists in general have a semblance of similar players, it's hard to argue who should they take out because they're all great. They're all amazing. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know who you take out and replace Steph Curry with. I just know that Steph Curry, for me, is top 5 at the minimum. And Kobe Bryant, again, I don't have a top 10 list, but Kobe Bryant is in the top 10. The fact that he wasn't even in the top 10 to me is like, wait a minute. Again, so many great players. It's hard to argue that anybody in the top, that, you know, the people that they put in the top 10 list, that any of them should be out because they are amazing too. So again, I don't know who you replace, but the fact that Kobe wasn't even in the top 10, like I know he was 1 away, he was 11, but the fact that he wasn't even in it, that's like a non-starter for me. Like Kobe has to be in the top 10 all time. You know, I'm not saying he has to be, you know, number 1. Obviously, I think that's Michael Jordan. That's the only solidified player on my ever top 10 list. So I'm not saying he has to be number 1, but I feel like, in my opinion, I feel like he has to be top 10 all time. Where you put him, I don't know. I don't have an opinion on where you put him. But Kobe, top 10 all time. That is my opinion. You know, that's how I feel. So I feel like Kobe was ranked too low. There was actually one player on the list who I felt like was actually ranked like perfectly and appropriately. And when I saw it, like, you don't necessarily usually look at these lists and you're like, oh, that player's in the perfect position. Ranking Kevin Durant 13th all time, to me, honestly felt like the perfect number. Some people will disagree. Some people will say Kevin Durant should be higher. Some people will say Kevin Durant should be lower. And I'm not here to argue, you know, what you think, where you think Kevin Durant should be, because everyone's entitled to their opinion. When I saw Kevin Durant at 13, I'm like, you know what? That sounds like right. Like, to me, that just felt right. I don't know how to explain it. It just like felt like the right number because anybody who tries to say KD is like, and it's funny because I had this conversation on a live stream recently when I was saying if KD wins a ring with the Rockets, where does he rank all time for you guys? And I don't remember what people were saying, but I'm pretty sure there was a semblance of he's top 15. Maybe if he wins, he would be top 10 in some people's eyes. I forgot what the answers were. But right now, as you know, his current career, 13 felt correct to me because there's no way KD is like the 50th best player all time. Like there's no way, right? But I also agree that I personally don't think KD is a top 5 player all time. And that's no disrespect to KD in any way, shape, or form. Like KD is one of the greatest players ever. And he has no holes in his offensive game. We know that he is like unbelievably gifted, like in a way that is just like impossible to even replicate. So I give all the credit to Kevin Durant in the world for his game. But 13 just felt like the right number. And I'm sure that he would obviously feel differently. I'm sure he feels like he's maybe the greatest player of all time, as he should, because that is, you know, himself. Or maybe he'd say he's second behind MJ. I don't know. But I think it's fair for him to feel that way because his game is, you know, that great. But I just felt like 13 was like a really like solid number for him. And I felt like it appropriately represented how good Kevin Durant is. Like I felt like maybe you could put him at 15, but I felt like 13 was a good number. Like I feel like if you put him too much lower than that, it's not really like, I don't want to say accurate because again, it's an opinion, but I felt like 13 gave him the credit that he deserved. Like we can't say KD is like, again, the 50th best player all time just because people don't like his move to Golden State. Like that is not accurate. Like Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant. So I felt like that was actually one player where I looked at the list and I'm like, that seems pretty fair. Actually, who was the other person? I think Dwight Howard was like 50 something. The Dwight Howard one seemed pretty fair to me too. Because Dwight Howard, I think, was left off the top 75 list to begin with, if I remember correctly, right? So the fact that he got in the top 75 now, I think is definitely good for him. I'm happy, even though it's not the same list. But Dwight Howard, like in his prime, was that guy. So I'm not going to go through, the 55 other players and say that he should be whatever, because that's really hard to do, like I said. I definitely think his number is probably somewhat fair. He definitely should have been top 75 all time. That's my opinion. I said it back when the list came out. I said he should have been in the top 75. So I'm glad that in this list that was created, he was in the top 75. So again, you can argue semantics, like maybe he should be a little bit higher, but I think him at least being in like the 50s and not outside the top 75, I feel like is, good and fair for him. And I'm glad he's in the top 75. So I was happy about that. And then there was one other player I'm trying to remember. It was lower down on the list. And I'm trying to remember who it was, but I'm drawing a blank because it's 100 players. So for me to memorize the 100 players on the list is, what's interesting though? Luka Doncic was on the top 100 all time. And I think he's the youngest player on the list at like 26. And I think he was higher than Dwight. I think maybe he was one higher. He was definitely in the 50s with Dwight. I don't remember if he was like right after him or a few after him. I can't remember. But Luka at 26 was already deemed a top 50-something player of all time, which I was like, whoa. Because again, he was definitely the youngest player on the list. Because the only active players that I remember being on the list was Luka, obviously Steph, LeBron, KD, James Harden. James Harden was pretty high on the list too, if I remember correctly. James Harden, Damian Lillard, Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson was too low in my opinion. 98 for Klay Thompson. I also thought he should have made top 75. So that I didn't agree with either. Klay Thompson at 98. I think we forget how good Klay Thompson was. I talked about this in a live stream maybe a few days ago where I was talking about, the Kevin Durant going to Golden State and stuff like that. And I was like, I think people forget that Klay Thompson was the best two-way player in basketball at that time. It was him and Kawhi Leonard. You could argue who was better, that's, up to your discretion. But Klay Thompson was that good. He was scoring 20 every single night, 60 on 11 dribbles, 37 points in a quarter. He has the record. He has the record for most threes in a game too with 14. Klay Thompson has these crazy records. But it wasn't just that. Klay Thompson was taking the point guard assignment every night. He was guarding Kyrie Irving in his prime and James Harden in his prime while averaging 20. So again, it was between him and Kawhi. They were both incredible as two-way players. So it was between them two. But the point I'm saying is I feel like Klay Thompson at 98 is a little too low for him. Again, I don't know where you put him. I don't know who you move him with, but I feel like he was too low. But back to the active players that are on the list. I think I said Damian Lillard. If I didn't, sorry. Damian Lillard, Jokic, and then Giannis. And Kyrie Irving was on the list too. And Joel Embiid was on the list. So out of those players I just mentioned, Luka is the youngest. I'm pretty sure. So Luka being on the list at 26 speaks very highly of him, or at least Bleacher Report, speaks very highly of him. Obviously, we know Luka is this otherworldly talent, of course. I'm not discrediting or taking away, from his talent. Again, I don't make these top 100 lists, so I don't even know where he would rank all time for me because I don't make these lists. But it was very, I don't even want to say surprising, but surprising just the fact that at 26, he already made the top 50-something list. So when he finishes his career and, hopefully gets a ring, where is he going to rank all time? That's going to be the interesting question. So thank you guys so much for watching this live stream. I hope you enjoy and see you soon. Bye.